Okay, everybody. On this week's podcast, I'm excited to introduce Kristin Jiles and Sherise Varga from the Jiles Group and the subsidiary eSearchPro. Welcome to the Honeit Podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Well, excellent. I know we've had a number of great conversations over the years and excited to have you on the podcast. Maybe we could talk a little bit about how you got into recruitment and how you've built out the Jiles Group.
Okay, excellent. Well, I will start. So I started in temporary staffing back in the early 90s and in the middle of a recession. And I really feel, and I will always say that I think that foundational experience of working in temporary staffing where you have to have a body show up at 10, 9 o'clock the next morning gave me the foundation for a very successful executive recruitment firm, because if you can keep that mentality and you move that to search, you're always going to win. So started with a company called Staff Support, worked with several of the regional large firms over the years, and then I went out on my own in 2000 and started the Jiles Group and eSearchPro. eSearchPro, just to explain, is the division that Sherise runs, and that is a focus on commercial talent on the software, digital marketing, digital media side. And then the Jiles Group has a focus more in healthcare, clinical lab, biotech. So.
Awesome. And Sherise, did you just jump in and start running a recruiting company, or how did you get into it?
Oh, well, gosh. I would say Kristin's like my second mom, but she's my mom's best friend, and she's always said, "Hey, Sherise, come recruit with me." And I'm like, recruiting's not for me, but thanks. And then I worked at a wine bar after I graduated college, and then she'd come, to my wine bar and be like, "Hey, you still got a job with me? Like, you'd be making a lot more money, Sherise." And I was like, "Well, no, like, thanks. I'm going to go travel." And I ended up going to New Zealand for a year on a work visa. And then I came home, and it was like right around the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. And I was like, well, like, there she goes again. Sherise, you're back. Please just come try recruiting with me. And I was like, well, since I probably won't get a job within the holiday season, I might as well just try it out, give it 3 months. And then 10 years later, here I am.
I know. It's more like 12 or 13 now, my dear.
Yeah. I have to check LinkedIn, but.
Yeah, I know.
There you go. So transferable skills from working at a wine bar. You got to schmooze and talk and be social there. You got to be able to talk to people here. That's like
anybody that has hospitality or bar restaurant is somebody you should talk to, because if they're any good at that, because there's a lot of transferable skills there for sure.
Well, tell me a little bit more. I know you've shifted kind of into healthcare, as a new focus area. I was curious what prompted that, maybe when the timing was of that. Did it have to do with COVID? Was it before then? Kind of what made that change, and what kind of most recruiters we talk to have some sort of a niche. Do you have a niche that you're working on there?
Yeah. So, I mean, our niche has always been sales, but then it's also broadened a bit into marketing and like product marketing, product management. Essentially anything where there's some sort of customer interfacing would be what we are most interested in filling. Things had to shift. COVID, as everybody knows, there was no recruiting going on during COVID. And, we were very strategic in focusing on salespeople because that tends to be the one category that a company will always find budget to hire if you've got somebody that's fantastic. But then enter COVID and lockdown. And so, we saw, not only did we have hiring halt, but so many layoffs. And so part of that time, what I did was to try and ingratiate myself, and I know Sherise did the same. I picked high-level SVP, C-levels that were out of work, and I would have conversations with them. And one of them happened to be in healthcare. It was a doctor that I worked with, and he was not unemployed, but he called me and said, "Hey, I know there's a lot of C-levels on the market right now. Will you help me out?" And there happened to be one that I had talked to. And so that's kind of how we fell into healthcare. Sherise did a little bit with them as well. It was a bariatric practice out of the Valley in LA. And so we just fell into it. And then things started to pick back up after lockdown ended, and software, we did okay for, gosh, I would say one of our best years was probably, 22, right? 21, 22.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. Great year. And then everything just kind of, the rug was pulled out. First numbers I saw were something like 50,000 recruiters out of work in just the United States alone. And then it was getting into, 6 digits. And so we had to pivot. So the one thing that doesn't go away is healthcare. And only by the grace of God, I happened to get a phone call from a friend of mine that was very high up in the commercial organization of a clinical lab. And then the Jiles Group was able to do some work there. So that kind of did some sustaining. I worked as a consultant there through the Jiles Group, and I know Sherise did some consulting on her own as well while we were waiting for the market to turn around. And I think we're seeing little glimmers of that now. I hope.
Yeah, I think a lot of guests on the podcast last week, Deanna, she's like most recruiters are. Business development, finding the recs, finding the money, finding where people are hiring and growing, right? And
Right.
It's like, good to see some of that. We're seeing some signals coming back from in 2025, like customers seem to be busier. Our customers seem to be hiring more recruiters. So some good signals, but I don't, it's going to take a little while to get back to what we were seeing,
Yeah.
2022 or whatnot. And, we'll see if this AI wave injects new money and people for new roles, right? Or if it does replace people. I think we're still kind of, not
Totally.
sure what we're seeing there. Talk a little bit about what separates your firm apart from the average recruiting firm, right? I think we're always looking at like a differentiation in our world. How do we deliver more to candidates or to clients? And what would you say makes the Jiles Group research like a good place to work, a differentiating recruiting firm?
Sherise?
Yeah. Well, I want to say there's a lot of things, right? I think a lot of it too is quality over quantity. We're not here to push paper or resumes, right? Or get them across the line. It's really vetting and having quality conversations with candidates and really finding and identifying what is their X factor, right? What makes them, what's the why? Are they a culture fit? It's goes beyond sales stats and quotas and that's all great, right? Right? President's Club. But it is kind of like, how do they align with the culture? Are they going to succeed? And I want to say we actually signed on with Honeit, was it back in 2021, 22, right after COVID, which I think really helped differentiate us. And I don't want to give away our secret, right? But it is Honeit has been a huge differentiator of showcasing the why, showcasing the X factor. It not only upskilled our own internal recruiting team to have, because now we have insight into their calls. We can look at their calls. We can see what questions they're asking. But on the flip side, right, when we submit to a client, they're hearing directly from the hiring manager of like, hey, that answer seemed, transactional, or I'm not sure, like it actually saved time for our clients and gave them time back, but also made our recruiters listen to their conversations and go, are they really a fit, or am I just trying to get someone across the line? And so I think that really differentiated us, because when we started having conversations with a lot of startup companies, typically Series A through D, when they get ready for that next stage of growth and growing their sales teams, that's when they bring us on board. But having that tool, Honeit, really upskilled us as a firm, because ultimately our goal is to, after our full vet, our goal is that our candidates are entering into a second stage interview with the hiring manager. We don't screen, we're providing them, like we've done that all for them. So
I love that. It's like you haven't just screened the candidate, you've conducted a fully comprehensive interview already, which is something that usually then the client would have to do. And you're like, no, we already did that for you. You're delivering more value, saving them time. I love that. And I love also how you mentioned kind of that X factor. I sometimes like to think it's like when you're interviewing someone or talking to a candidate and you hear them say something amazing, you're like, oh my gosh, this is the person. Like based on what they just said or the story they told you, you just know. And then it's like, how do you then communicate that enthusiasm that you just heard or that story in a way, we find these sound bites. So it's like that power of voice can really help get the client on the same page,
Yeah. Also,
go ahead. Sorry.
Also in just building the relationship, right? There's a lot of times when you get a unique role and you're like, okay, you're just building your case, and Honeit allows you to build your case, right? Like, hey, I talked to this great candidate. Where do you see them fit? And so you kind of change your relationship from an agency to a consultant, and you're helping them find and identify maybe the purple squirrel that doesn't exist, but they do. And that's why they bring Kristin and I in our firm.
Yeah. And the only other thing that I would add to that is, I think there's a couple things, but one of the things that Sherise and I have always said, and that I taught her early on, is to always remember that we have two clients. So you have a client that pays the bills, but your candidate is just as much of a client as your client is. And I think you have to approach things with integrity, and you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror in the morning and feel good about where you are putting that father with a stay-at-home wife and 4 kids, right? Like if you know that there's some shenanigans going on, A, you need to fire the client, and B, you don't need to place people there. So that's just the way we've always sort of approached things. And, I think that's just, it comes down to integrity and approaching things with integrity. And sometimes it costs us money. And sometimes we pull a candidate back because they've done things with us that the hiring manager has seen none of. And we know that they're going to be a backfill. And, that's happened. I think so we've been working together 13 years. We've probably pulled candidates back 5 times. Mm-hmm. I mean, literally 5 times where they were ready for offer.
Wow. That's crazy because, we talked a little bit about this, but, going in-house when you work for a company internally within the HR department as a TA partner, you do start to look for yellow flags and red flags. And in fact, blocking a bad hire could be way more valuable to the company than making a reasonable hire or making a good hire even. But you're saying you've done that even on the outside of things 100%. When you're commission driven and because one is not going to work out, you're going to be replacing that person in, say, 3 months for a backfill, like you said.
Well, hopefully by that time we care about the hiring manager and we care about the executive leadership. And, if that's the case, if we truly do care and have a partnership established, why would we do that? Why would we put like a bad apple, especially because we're working with startups most of the time? Like one bad apple and you're sunk, man. I can blow the whole
and then letting people go at a startup too is very demoralizing, and it's even more impactful than if you have 10,000 employees and someone leaves or whatnot. You 100%. Said something really interesting though, which I think we have to remind ourselves as recruiters is, when people change jobs, that's a big life decision. I mean, that's up there with buying a house and things like that, right? In terms of, is it the right fit? You're going to be happy. You're going to come home happy. Like, you're going to be able to put food on the table, all this kind of thing. It made me think, using AI for big decisions like that also seems a little crazy. Like, we haven't even seen AI be a thing that says, okay, yeah, I want to buy a car, find me the best price, I'll use AI to do that. Like, we're not even seeing AI do that stuff for smaller things in our life, right? Yet at the same time, we're hearing about how AI is going to replace hiring and people are going to automate the interview and recruiting process with AI. And I'm like, I don't know yet. I mean, until people start doing a lot of the little stuff in their lives with AI, hey, find me the best price on this. Hey, do this, buy out. Some of that low-hanging fruits, that stuff's got to get there before I would think someone starts doing big purchases, buying a house with AI, or making job change decisions. What are your thoughts on again, kind of AI is everywhere around us, but you just mentioned like it is a big decision. And would you leave that to chance or have AI make that decision for you? I don't know.
I mean, we don't even like customer service that's outsourced to another country. Right? Because there's a little bit of a language barrier where, so why would we want to automate the hiring process completely? That's just, I am not concerned about our job going away because of AI. I think you're going to sink or swim as a recruiter. I mean, I think that only the top talent in recruiting will be remaining in another couple of years, because and it's going to be those of us that are wired for optimism, I think, to be honest, because the people that are pessimists, I'm seeing it on all of the recruiting boards. The people that are pessimists are sitting there saying, okay, well, what other industries can I take these skills, and transplant them into? Because I just don't see recruitment as being a viable option anymore. I just read that yesterday on something. And it's like, wow, that's just a super pessimistic attitude. But at the same time, if you're broke, you're broke. You got to go do something else, right? If it's not working for you and you don't like the business development piece, I mean, that's just the way it goes. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of what I'm thinking is like, I don't see it going away completely, our jobs.
Yeah. What do you think, Sherise? I think like keeping the human and human resources is like a really important thing. And like,
that's a no-brainer.
Yeah. For companies like human resources, there might be less humans doing jobs in certain companies if they start supplementing that work with AI or with robots to do some of the thing, but there's still going to be a subset of your workforce. Now you could say AI workforce or human workforce, and that's where the human resources function will still probably focus their energy. And maybe there's an AI resources organization that supports and makes sure the robots are treated with fairly and things like that. I don't know. But what do you think, Sherise? Where does kind of that human high touch authenticity with automation, AI, where do you see things going?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's going to be a huge, you'll see it. It'll be very company by company. Companies that are people centric are going to want the human element back into recruiting, into their people, right? There's only so much it can screen for, but it can't screen for the soft skills, right? It's just looking at a resume. And that's why, Honeit has been such a value add in selling our services, because we're not only creating an extension, ultimately we're acting as an extension to their recruiting bench. We are representing our client and their brand and what their mission is and how, what they're doing, their 3 to 5 year plan and the people that they need. But an AI conversation is not going to be able to express that, right? And it's dating. It's a two-way street when you're courting a candidate, a client's courting a candidate, the candidate's courting the client, right? Until they make a decision, whether that's offer or not. And so I do agree with Kristin. I think those who have built those relationships, those who can keep using these tools to add value to our services, absolutely. But it goes back to the relationship piece. And you can't really have a relationship with AI. Well, not sure where it's going now, but I just think in terms of talent acquisition, it's very people centric. So
I think you're right. One of the things that you talked about was making it fun and kind of a mindfulness of success. I think we had touched on a little bit, and we talked a little bit about yesterday. But what makes recruiting fun? How do you keep it fun, right? To keep that positivity or optimism, Kristin, that you mentioned. How can we do that? Like, how do we stay more positive? Or if we are getting frustrated, what can a recruiter do? Any advice to look on the bright side, try to find the silver lining?
Yeah, I mean, I think what it boils down to is people can detect when you're selling them, right? I think authenticity is huge and being real is huge. And like, I'm pretty much always who I am, no matter who I'm dealing with. And you either like it or you don't. Hopefully most people like it. I'm not really sure, but I mean, like one of the things, and this is backtracking a little bit, but one of the things that I've also, instilled in Sherise, and I know she believes the same, is I will never talk a candidate into taking a job. I'm just not going to do it. It's like, and you can hear yourself, because if you're a salesperson, you start like, they're so close to taking it and they've got 2 offers and you're like, yeah, but there's this, you can kind of guide them. But then when you're kind of coming on a little too strong, I have literally been in conversations where I'm extending a verbal or pre-closing somebody. And I have said, wait a minute. I sound like I'm talking you into taking this job, and either they've done a good job in tandem with me and you're ready, or you're not. But if you're not sure, I'm not going to advise you to do it. And so I think that causes you to be trustworthy. And when you are trustworthy, whether it's a candidate or a client, I think then the fun starts, right? Because they trust you to be able to. I had a mentor, a guy named Ed Rossich, who is amazing and has taken us with him through. One of the things that he taught us was a phrase called earned familiarity. So like, it's great to be familiar and have your guard down, but have you earned that right yet? And so I think once you have earned the right to familiarity with a client or a candidate, then the fun really starts, right? Because then there's no pretenses. You're seeing really who they are. That's also when you get to a better cultural fit. And I think that's actually why we're so good at cultural fits, is because we do get to know our clients and what makes them tick, to be able to know which candidate is going to slide in best. And sometimes it's not about whether or not they match the skill set 100%. Sometimes it's 90% and they got a great attitude or super high drive or, whatever. So, but I mean,
love it. And I love that Sherise mentioned that earlier. It's like, you might just find, that company so well, having supported a few different teams and kind of knowing how it operates, that when you talk to a random candidate out there, you're like, oh my gosh, they'd be perfect for this company. You've now built the trust. You could, and then you can say, listen to this candidate, or here's some insights from this call. Where in the organization do you think they would be, right? It's a little less round peg to round peg, and it's more like, you just know this person checks a few of the industry boxes and maybe the competency boxes, but also has the X factor, that it factor. And then I like it, Sherise, it's like, where in your organization would this person be a great fit? It's almost a whole different framing than, I'm going to go to market just to find you one person to fit this one job. No, I'm going to always be on the lookout for you as a partner. And I'm going to bring people to your organization that we know would check all the basics, but also, culture plus, value add, all that other good stuff.
Yep.
That was fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what happens too is other departments. So obviously we probably about 80% focus on sales leadership or sales and leadership, but like the other 20% could run across rev ops, marketing, anything client facing, right? I think Kristin mentioned when we do engineering, it's like literally a crossword puzzle. We like fingers crossed for a personality match. Well, it's just a foreign language to me, but anyways, I think it gives you the opportunity to then like have your candidates be forwarded to other, like, the CMO or director of marketing, and say, hey, we're using these recruiters for our sales teams. Do you think they could, are they a resource you would like to use for, your open recs? And then they see the tool Honeit and they're like, oh, yes, that would be great. Because now we're not learning a whole new function, or like, let's say, I know growth marketing, performance marketing, sales enablement before sales enablement was a thing, right? An actual coined term. Gosh, it's now been maybe 8 years ago, but it's like Honeit has allowed like us moving into other parts and segments of the business to also now, build those relationships cross-departmentally. So it's almost been also fun about it.
We've talked and joked about like MPCs as a good, in a kind of old school function to win new business or generate new business with new clients. But it sounds like you're almost doing not blinded MPCs, but, marketing amazing candidates just to your existing clients to then uncover maybe new opportunities within the organization or new departments to work with. So I think that's a great strategy for recruiters.
The other thing about that is the intake, not the intake calls, but like what I did with Prometheus was I interviewed everybody. I interviewed their direct boss. I interviewed the president of the company. I interviewed the trainer. I interviewed a couple of salespeople, and I provided that when I would send information to a candidate. So they had all of those interviews to listen to. And
Wow.
that was wildly successful. And Sherise is super good about doing that with clients too.
So the job previews, the highlights from the kickoff calls, and kind of meet the hiring team.
So we would do a meet the team. We would do a meet the team, and we took it a lot more granularly than I think some people would, and that was a huge selling point too. Plus, it makes the client feel, like we really care and that we want to get into again the culture fit.
But now you're also doing more than just sourcing or recruiting. You're helping them build the brand, their employment brand, your marketing. I think these are some services and that we're starting to see recruiters get into. When it goes beyond just say screening or sourcing candidates, it's talent strategy, right? And
we've seen a tremendous difference with candidate engagement. Just using those meet the client. Just faster turnaround. I remember it's funny, but when I first joined Kristin, she was like, we had an intake with the hiring manager and she's like, okay, great. It's like, the last question is, when can we expect to see a candidate? And she's like, about 72 hours. And I'm like, it's like my first role, Kristin. I can't, I'm going to deliver someone in 3 days, and it really.
You can deliver somebody in 4 hours at times.
Well, no, now I know, but she really lit a fire under my butt.
Right.
But I guess it was back to that drive. And then when we had Honeit, it was like, wow, like just the candidate engagement was a huge, huge value add, because all of a sudden now we're not waiting, okay, it's literally 4 hours, or they respond in an hour, because you see it being clipped and you're like, okay, my messages aren't just getting lost in cyberspace. It's someone's actually reading it. And I think that client profile really set us apart too.
Yeah. And then one thing I'd like to tag on to that, and this is another way to use Honeit. So I'm telling you, anyway, there was, I'll stay anonymous, but there was someone that was a very high level executive that was laid off. We'll call it a layoff. And in order to help this individual find another opportunity, I did a Honeit with him and just hosted the link. And as he would apply for different high level, like senior VP jobs, he had a Honeit that went over basics of sales leadership and, executive sales background. So that's actually something that I wanted to talk to you about, Nick, because
there you go. So he could use it when he's applying for jobs, be like, hey, I've already been pre-screened by Kristin.
It would be fabulous if we could get like just something where you can do like a bunch of different logos, because what I did was I just created him something that said his name and put that as the logo. With his picture. And I think that's a value add service for people that are unemployed.
I love it. Let me know, Kristin, we can even shorten those links. What I've done is I've even done a call with a friend who's looking for work. Yep. And I shorten it. I turn it to like honeit.co/Bob Johnson. And then Bob has his own personal link. He can put it on his resumes and cover letters. And so, we could talk about that. I think there's a real opportunity for helping people. It's like, okay, I don't have anything for you, but hey, pay it forward. Here's a link. Hopefully this will help. And then, man, if that person does find a job, who are they going to call when they need help hiring?
And especially if they're a hiring manager. That's right.
That's right.
So
the other thing I was thinking for outplacement firms who do talk to impacted employees and do a mock interview. Hey, what do you want to be doing next? What did you do at your current company? Those all could be insights that could be a takeaway from an outplacement call. So I've been thinking about
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, it's such a powerful tool. We keep going back to Honeit, but that's because we love it so much. The only thing is we don't like to tell other recruiters that we compete with about it. That's the only bad flaw in it.
You won't post this on YouTube and LinkedIn and everywhere. Don't worry.
No, it's our
Well,
secret weapon.
We went through most of the things that I really wanted to cover, but I really wanted to just say thank you so much for the time and for sharing your tips. We know it's a kind of a tricky time out there for recruiters and even talent partners in general. But I think, I think that's right. We're using the right tools, finding new ways to be innovative, finding new ways to provide value to clients and candidates. And there's going to be new revenue opportunities, and there's going to be new ways to help in this industry. It's going to change as it's changed over the years, but even the example you shared at the end, a service out there that helps people open to work, brand themselves, skip the first phone screen. That could be a very good service, and whether or not candidates are paying for it or clients potentially pay for it, you figure out the model, but that's a business in itself, right? So
yeah, I think so.
Opportunity.
Well, I mean, we can't thank you enough, because honestly, I feel like even beyond our CRM that we love, we set ourselves apart through Honeit. So we're big cheerleaders. And yes, we do tell people about it actually, but reluctantly.
Thank you so much. Well, Kristin and Sherise, thank you so much for joining us on this week's podcast. Where can people get a hold of you if they need an extra hand hiring or recruiting or embedded consulting support? Where can they find you?
Yeah, very, very easily. So eSearchPro is eSearchPro.com, and the Jiles Group is thejilesgroup.com. There's phone numbers on there that will typically route to us, but I'm happy to give my cell, which is 540-706-7098. And Sherise's is 619.
No, 858.
858. I forget.
Yeah. 858-705-8084. And find me on LinkedIn. I'm in San Diego. So if you ever want to meet up for a coffee or a local wine bar, that's where you can find me.
There you go. Wine tips as well.
Yeah.
Well, we'll also tag you on the LinkedIn post so everybody can find you. But thanks again for joining the Honeit podcast. I'm excited to continue working together.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Nick. We
Thanks
loved
so much,
it.
Nick.
Okay, take care.
Cheers.
Bye.